This is The Quiet End, and tonight I'll tell you a story titled The Dreamer's Cage. Let's begin. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it had any right to. Elliot sat on the edge of the therapist's leather couch, hands fidgeting with the fraying hem of his sleeve. Beneath his hollow eyes, dark circles carved crescents into his face, and the weight of countless sleepless nights had stolen the luster from his skin. He hadn't seen the world clearly in months. Everything blurred at the edges, time, space, even thought, all melting into a heady mess of disorientation. Somnus coherence, the therapist said, her voice too calm, too steady, almost artificial. It's cutting edge, a shared dream network designed to realign neural pathways. Think of it as a guided retreat for your subconscious. He blinked at her, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. Dream sharing? It sounded like a scam cooked up by pseudo-scientific grifters, or worse, a high-tech invasion of privacy masquerading as help. His lips parted to say as much, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he just stared, caught between skepticism and the dull ache of hope. What if it worked? What if he could finally sleep? You've tried everything else, Elliot, she continued, leaning forward as if sensing his hesitation. This is the last stop for a lot of people like you, and it works, or at least, it's worked for most. The implication wasn't lost on him. Most. He sighed heavily, his chest tightening with the familiar grip of dread, but he nodded. Whatever reservations he felt were outweighed by the sheer exhaustion hollowing him out. He didn't care about risks anymore. He just wanted to dream again. 2 days later, Elliot found himself in a sterile clinical room, its walls the color of old bones. A web of thin wires connected him to a sleek machine that hummed faintly, its screen displaying pulsing patterns that mimicked a heartbeat. A technician in white scrubs adjusted the electrodes on his temples and muttered something about calibration. The air smelled of antiseptic and something faintly metallic, like the edge of a coin pressed to the tongue. Just relax, the technician said. Once the system initiates, you won't feel a thing. The AI will guide the dreamscape. Remember, the more open your mind, the better the coherence. Elliot swallowed hard and shut his eyes. The hum grew louder, filling his skull like a far-off engine roaring to life. For a moment, it was almost soothing. Until it wasn't. Somewhere deep within his mind, a presence stirred. Not the AI, no, this felt otherworldly, alien, as though he wasn't stepping into a dream, but something older, something waiting. The hum twisted into a low vibration, crawling through his thoughts, and a single fragmented image flashed behind his eyelids. A cage, endless and pulsating with shadows. And then, silence. At first, there was only the darkness. It wasn't the comforting black of sleep, nor the hollow void Elliot had come to know in his sleepless nights. This was different. Thick, heavy, and alive with an undercurrent of something watching. But then, as if a curtain had been pulled back, the darkness dissolved. Light bled into his vision, warm and otherworldly. Elliot found himself standing in the middle of a meadow. The grass beneath his feet was soft, almost unnaturally so, and the air carried the faint scent of lavender. Above him, the sky stretched in a strange violet hue, rippling like a silken veil. It should have been beautiful, but the colors felt alien, as if they had been plucked from some forgotten dream and forced to exist here. He turned slowly, taking it in. The meadow wasn't empty. Scattered across the field were other figures, their forms shimmering faintly as though they weren't fully there. They were faceless, yet somehow he sensed their gazes. Curious, silent, suffocating. They drifted aimlessly like specters, their movements unsettlingly synchronized. None of them acknowledged him, but Elliot felt their presence weighing on him, pressing against his mind like an invisible hand. Far in the distance, piercing the alien sky, a dark spire loomed. Its surface was jagged and uneven, as if it had been carved from obsidian by trembling hands. It didn't belong here. Nothing about it felt natural, not even in the logic of a dream. The longer he stared, the more his chest tightened, a cold dread unfurling within him. His instincts screamed at him to look away, but he couldn't. Not yet. Then it happened. A voice, or something like a voice, cut through the stillness. It wasn't loud, more like a whisper threading through the air, but it carried an undeniable weight. It called his name, Elliot. He spun around, heart pounding. The faceless dreamers didn't react, their movements undisturbed. The whisper came again, closer this time, almost brushing against his ear. "Elliot, who's there?" he demanded, his voice trembling as it broke the oppressive silence. But there was no answer, just the feeling, no, the certainty that he was not alone, even among these silent figures. And then, as if in response to his fear, the meadow shifted. The vibrant grass wilted, its green bleeding into muted grays. The air grew colder, and the spire in the distance seemed to pulse, a faint vibration that he could feel deep in his bones. Elliot knew, without understanding how, that the voice had come from the spire, and it was waiting for him. Elliot woke with a sharp inhale, the sterile ceiling of the clinic snapping into focus. His heart raced, his body slick with sweat, but there was something else, an odd clarity. For the first time in what felt like years, he wasn't drowning in the fog of exhaustion. His mind was sharp, alert. Was this what rested people felt like? The technician helped him sit up, their expression carefully neutral. "How do you feel?" they asked, clipboard tucked under one arm. "Fine," Elliot said, though the word felt too small to hold the mix of emotions churning inside him. He hesitated, the memory of the spire and the whisper clinging to him like a shadow. Just strange dreams. The technician merely nodded, as if that were expected. He left the clinic with an energy that felt stolen, unnatural. Yet no matter how awake he felt, the dream lingered in the corners of his mind. By the third session, the dreams had turned against him. The meadow was no longer serene. The grass had become brittle, its once vibrant green now a sickly yellow. The faceless dreamers around him had changed, their forms warping. Limbs stretched impossibly long, their movements jerky and wrong, like marionettes handled by an unsteady hand. One brushed past him, and though it had no face, Elliot swore he felt its gaze burrow deep into him. The spire loomed closer now. He didn't remember walking toward it, but each time he dreamed it was nearer, its jagged edges clearer, its oppressive presence stronger. The whisper, too, had changed. It wasn't distant anymore. It was intimate, curling into his thoughts like smoke. It no longer simply called his name, it spoke in fragments, incomplete sentences. "You see it, don't you? It's always been here." One night, as he turned to flee from the shifting figures, he noticed something new. The ground beneath him had begun to dissolve into a swirling black ichor. Tendrils of it writhed just below the surface, reaching for his feet, for his shadow. They dissipated the moment he woke, but the memory of their cold, serpentine touch lingered far longer. "These dreams feel wrong," Elliot told the therapist after another session. His voice sounded small, like a child reporting a nightmare. "They're getting darker." She only smiled, a placid smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Progress sometimes feels uncomfortable," she said. "The spire is likely the key to unraveling the tension in your mind. Keep moving toward it." But Elliot wasn't so sure. The spire didn't feel like a key. It felt like a lock, one he wasn't meant to open. Elliot's unease festered. The dreams weren't therapy, they were something else, something invasive. He began watching the other patients in the waiting area. On the surface, they seemed ordinary, just like him, people desperate for relief. But the longer he observed, the more wrong they appeared. Their movements were slow, their shoulders hunched as if carrying invisible weights. Their eyes, hollow, lifeless. They didn't even seem to notice him staring. "Why do they look like that?" he asked the technician one afternoon. The man, who had been adjusting the electrodes on another patient's head, barely glanced at him. "The calibration can be disorienting for some," he said dismissively, his voice mechanical. "Dream coherence requires adaptation." Elliot's jaw tightened. It wasn't an answer. None of them ever gave him answers. That night, the dreamscape was different. The meadow was gone, swallowed entirely by gray earth that cracked beneath his steps. The spire was no longer a distant shape. It towered in front of him now, its jagged form piercing the sky. Shadows rippled across its surface like veins beneath pale skin. The whisper, constant and maddening, had become deafening, its words too fragmented to make sense. And then he saw it, a figure, draped in robes so dark they seemed to absorb the dim light of the dream. It stood at the base of the spire, motionless. Its presence was suffocating, a gravity that pulled at his very thoughts. As Elliot approached, the figure turned, or maybe it didn't. It had no face beneath the hood, only a void. "Elliot," it said, though its voice wasn't carried by the air. It was inside his head, sliding through his thoughts like oil. I am Nixilith. His knees weakened, his body screaming to flee, but he couldn't. Something rooted him in place. What do you want? He stammered. Nixilith's voice was a low resonance, like the hum of the machine from the waking world. You come to me willingly each night. You open the door that binds me, inch by inch. I feed on your fears, your hopes, your memories, and I grow stronger. Elliot's breath quickened. This is supposed to be therapy. His voice cracked. This isn't therapy? The word twisted in his mind, heavy with mockery. No, Elliot, this is a feast, and you are the meal. As the words reverberated in his skull, the black ichor bubbled up from the ground, writhing tendrils reaching for him. He turned to run, but every step felt heavier, the world bending around him, dragging him back toward the spire. When he woke, the whisper lingered, faint but ever present. He knew with a dreadful certainty that Nixilith was still with him. Elliot tried to stay away. He really did. But sleep was no longer his enemy. It was his tormentor. The nights without Somnus coherence were relentless. His body rebelled. Headaches so sharp they felt like shards of glass piercing his skull. Hallucinations flickered at the edges of his vision. Shadows darting, whispers trailing behind him. By day he was a husk, crushed under the weight of fatigue so profound it felt like drowning. He lasted 3 days. Desperate, trembling, he returned to the clinic. The technician didn't even pretend to be surprised as they reattached the electrodes. Resistance isn't uncommon, they said, almost bored. Your mind craves coherence. Elliot wanted to argue, wanted to scream that this wasn't coherence, it was a cage. But the words felt hollow, and the hunger for relief drowned them out. When the machine hummed to life, he closed his eyes and braced himself. The dreamscape came roaring back, but it was no longer a meadow or even a desolate field. It was a labyrinth, a twisting, grotesque maze of walls that seemed alive. The surfaces pulsed, slick and veined, like flesh stretched too thin. Fused into these walls were the faceless dreamers, their bodies distorted and melted into the grotesque architecture. Their mouths yawned open in silent screams, their hollow eyes tracking him as he moved. The spire was no longer distant. It was part of the labyrinth now, a massive beating heart that sent rhythmic pulses through the air. Each thrum rattled his bones, and with every beat, the walls seemed to tighten, the corridors shrinking. Elliot, Nixilith's voice was no longer a whisper. It was everywhere, booming and omnipresent, shaking the labyrinth with every syllable. You suffer, you ache, but I can take it away, eternal rest, no more pain, no more waking terror. He pressed his hands to his ears, but it didn't matter. The voice was inside him, threading through his thoughts, unrelenting. Submit, Elliot, step into the cage, and I will grant you peace. He stumbled forward, his legs trembling, the pulsing walls disorienting him. Tendrils of ichor slithered from the ground, curling around his ankles, teasing at his resistance. Somewhere deep inside, a primal fear screamed at him to run, to fight, but his body was weak, his mind fractured. And the worst part? Those silent screams in the walls, they looked so familiar now. Elliot jolted awake, his body drenched in cold sweat, his heart racing like it might burst. The dream wasn't fading this time. It clung to him, sharp and vivid, as if it had sunk claws into his mind. He couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't therapy. This was something else, something monstrous. He stumbled out of bed, his head pounding, and made his way back to the clinic under the cover of night. The building was eerily silent when he slipped inside. The hum of the machines seemed louder in the stillness, their rhythmic vibrations crawling under his skin. He moved through the hallways, his eyes darting to every shadow, until he found an office door slightly ajar. Inside, a dim desk lamp illuminated scattered files and a computer screen left unlocked. His hands trembled as he rifled through the documents. The words blurred at first, scientific jargon, clinical notes, but then he saw it. The words made his stomach drop. Nixilith protocol. The therapy wasn't therapy at all. It was an experiment, a ritual in disguise. The dreams were never about healing, they were the bridge. The Somnus coherence machine wasn't repairing minds, it was tearing something open. An ancient entity locked in a void between dimensions was using their collective subconscious to break free. Each dream chipped away at its prison. Elliot's breath hitched as the screen flickered. He turned sharply and froze. The technician stood in the doorway, their face half lit by the flickering glow. But something was wrong. Their eyes were dull, glassy, like polished stones. Their mouth twitched, stretching unnaturally at the edges. "You shouldn't be here," they said, their voice layered, distorted, as though something else spoke alongside them. "You're not human," Elliot whispered, backing away. His pulse thundered in his ears. The technician stepped forward, their movements stiff, almost mechanical, and Elliot caught a glimpse of their hands, too long, the skin rippling like the ichor from the dreamscape. He ran, but the clinic was alive now, humming with an unnatural energy. The staff emerged from the shadows, their forms twisted, their eyes empty but focused on him. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. Nixilis was in them, steering their hollow shells. Elliot's escape ended abruptly. Two of them grabbed him, their fingers cold and unyielding. "No!" he yelled, thrashing. "You can't make me go back!" But it was no use. They dragged him back to the therapy room, strapping him into the chair. The machine loomed over him, humming louder, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. The technician, or whatever they had become, leaned close, their head tilting unnaturally. "You will dream again," they said, their voice laced with Nixilis's presence. "And this time, the door will open wider." The machine activated without his consent. The hum swallowed him whole, dragging him back into the nightmare before he could even scream. The spire stretched endlessly upward, alive with writhing shadows that rippled like flesh under strain. The pulsing grew louder with each step Elliot climbed, the vibrations pounding through his body, rattling his teeth. His breath came in ragged gasps, his limbs heavy as though the spire itself resisted his approach. But he couldn't stop. Nixilis waited for him at the apex, pulling him closer with every beat of its monstrous heart. When he reached the summit, the dreamscape dissolved into a void so dark it consumed all light, leaving only the spire and the entity that rested atop it. Elliot froze as he saw Nixilis's true form, a writhing mass of tendrils, gnashing teeth that gleamed like broken glass, and countless eyes that turned toward him in unison. The sight was overwhelming, fracturing his thoughts into splinters. "You have been resistant," Nixilis's voice thundered, each syllable clawing at his mind. "And that resistance has ripened you. Oh, how your fear has flavored your essence. You are ready." "Ready for what?" Elliot screamed, his voice breaking as his legs buckled beneath him. The tendrils shifted, stretching toward him, their movements languid and predatory. "To be my vessel," Nixilis hissed, the resonance vibrating through the void. "You will carry me into the waking world. Through your mind I will feast upon humanity. And you, Elliot, you will know hunger beyond comprehension." He stumbled back, his instincts screaming to flee, but the spire was collapsing, the walls of the dreamscape folding inward like a maw ready to devour him. The tendrils lashed out, coiling around his arms, his legs, his throat. He fought, thrashing against their grip, but his strength was nothing against the entity's will. The void swallowed him, the gnashing teeth growing closer until all light surrendered. Then he woke. The clinic's fluorescent lights flickered above him, but everything felt wrong. The air was too thick, the hum of the machine too loud, every sound skewed as though his ears no longer belonged to him. Elliot staggered to his feet, his body trembling, his mind swimming with disorientation. He moved to the mirror in the corner of the room, desperate to see his reflection, proof that he was still himself. But when he looked, something else stared back. His eyes, no longer his own, shimmered with an unnatural, oily darkness. They blinked too slow, too deliberate, like a predator testing its prey. His mouth curled into a smile he didn't choose, the corners stretching wider than they should. Inside his head, Nixilis's voice purred, low and satisfied. "You will never wake again, Elliot, not truly." And as he stared at the thing in the mirror, he felt it, the hunger, gnawing, endless, ravenous. He opened his mouth to scream, but it wasn't his voice that came out. The last piece of Elliot crumbled into the void, swallowed by the cage he had never escaped. So tell me, dear listener, when you close your eyes tonight, Are your dreams really yours, or whose cage are you in? Subscribe for more chilling tales, and hit the bell to stay in the dark. See you at the next Quiet End.